Hey everybody, it's the Nitty Professor. I'm here with my dog Benny and my cat Budapest. And let's just take a quick break and go into Walmart and check out the yarns they have and where they're from. We'll be right back. Let's just see where you guys are made, shall we? Premier Yarns. Made in Turkey. Recycled yarn. Made in India. What about this guy? Chunky big yarn. Let's see here. Made in Turkey. Pretty colors. It's kind of fun. Heko and Turkiya. Also made in Turkey. Made in India. Made in India. This is made in India. What else have we got here? Made in Turkey. Also made in Turkey. Made in India. There we go. So yeah. All of these guys made in Turkey, made in India. There's another India. In India. Interesting. Okay, so that was pretty interesting. So I also went to Hobby Lobby. Is that a cuss word? Just putting that out there. So anyhow, I went there. We only have a couple places to buy yarn at all here in town. Otherwise, it's either online or out of town. So unfortunately, Hobby Lobby was playing music, so I thought that would run into some copyright issues. But in any case, so saw mainly yarn from Turkey, a bit from India, and a bit from China. At Walmart, I think I didn't see the Chinese yarn, but I'm sure it was there. But there was quite a bit at Hobby Lobby. Nonetheless, a lot of yarn from Turkey. So a lot of our more accessible, cheaper yarns are from Turkey. And I just thought this is kind of an interesting situation. I've never been to Turkey. I'm betting some of you have. And I would love to know your impressions. I've heard some pretty good things about people going to Hagia Sophia and stuff like that. That Turkey is a really interesting place to go. I would probably, if I went there at all, I'd probably want to go with one of my sons, maybe both. I don't know. I'm just, they are less feminist than I am. But in any case, maybe I'm off base there, so do let me know. I haven't been there. But in any case, there's a lot of yarn that's made in Turkey. And, you know, the whole issue of what we hold in our hands to make things with comes from is, it's always been, I think, worth exploring, worth knowing about. And today, probably more so than ever. Because there is, you know, a lot of talk about global trade and the degree to which it's good. Now, globalization is something that I've explored a lot in my own scholarship, more with regard to land and with regard to its spread. But it's here and it's here to stay, and there's an awful lot of competition out there for who's going to manufacture what. And I heard a podcast that talked about how China wants, within, I think, the next 10 years, to literally manufacture 45% of the world's goods. Now that's a lot. They have all these dark factories that are run by AI, and they're called that because the lights don't need to be turned on. Everything is done by robots. It's crazy. And that's something that potentially we could have over here, but let's just face it, we're way behind China in the technology for manufacturing and distribution. So unless there's a significant investment on the part of government and significant investment in higher education to look into these issues and compete with China, it's not going to happen. AI is similar. They're almost neck and neck with us. They're way ahead of us in EVs and battery technology over in China. So now there are reasons behind that have to do with the form of government over there. They can make quick decisions in a way that's not possible in our country because there's so much deliberation, debate, and contention. So yeah, there can be certain advantages of heavy-handed government control in the way of just making a decision. We're going to have XYZ technology. We're going to compete in XYZ manner, and boom, it's there. Now, workers be damned, right? So it may or may not be in a way that benefits workers. I think there's a case to be made that workers in China are not as well off as workers in, say, the European Union. So in any case, another interesting issue with regard to yarn production. So I like wool. I know more about wool than I know about cotton. I've investigated cotton historically, partly because of the volume in my novel series that deals with making historical, so spinning wheels in the 19th century. What were they for, right? They were for linen, they were for wool, they were for cotton. Who did spinning? That's another really interesting question that I'm not going to delve into at this particular moment, but it's something that I had to look into when I was writing volume 4 of my novel series called The Spinning Wheel Maker. So in any case, I looked into kitty cat. No, she's knocking stuff over. I looked into sheep. So the number of sheep that are in various countries, because I think about the wool that I have, and personally, I don't think I have any wool from Turkey. I might have a couple of skeins of this or that from Turkey, but I privilege, when I go out and I buy yarn, I privilege Western countries. I don't know. It's like my tribe. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm from the United States. I have spent a lot of time in Europe. I'm mainly English. I've got some German blood and maybe a smidgen of French could be. My sister claims that we're related to Charlemagne. Who isn't, right? But I started with the U.S. I asked Google, Goggle, Gemini, whoever, how many sheep are in the United States? 5 million. I was like, well, that's a lot, right? 5 million. That's a lot of sheep. I have a friend who raises sheep, although I think she's kind of phasing that out. And her mother, who's in her 80s, also has a few sheep. So I've had a number of friends. There are a fair number of sheep in South Dakota. But then I looked up how many sheep were in Turkey. Well, it was like 40 million. So yeah, I think it was 44 million. They have a lot more sheep than we do. And if memory serves, it's a smaller country. So then I looked at some other countries. Now, I didn't look up China. Look up China for me. It'd be interesting to know how many sheep there are in China. China is the largest yarn producer in the world right now. United States is down probably around 8th or 9th, something like that. And I think by yarn, if I'm looking up that, it's probably not just like yarn that I would use to knit a sock, but it's also the yarn that's used in, spinning fabric for any kinds of clothes. So there's a lot of, fabric production going on in the United States. It's more like technical type things, the fabric that you would use in garments to protect fire, emergency responders, firefighters, that kind of thing. So we still have it, but I already did a podcast on the demise of the textile industry in the United States, because I used to shop at Pepperell Mills, and down in Alabama and Georgia, we used to go to these outlet stores, the Russell Mill store and all this kind of stuff. It's all gone, and I think it's sad. But in any case, sheep. Yeah, so sheep. Europe, if memory serves, has like 60 million sheep, something like that, 60, 70 million. Australia alone has close to that many. Australia has like almost 10 times as many sheep as the United States. Isn't that crazy? South America, I think, if I'm just trying to recall what I looked up, 70 or 80 million sheep in South America. Now, I didn't divide it by country. It would be interesting to do that, because a lot of wool comes from South America. Heck, a lot of wool comes from New Zealand. There are like 20 million sheep in New Zealand. It's a tiny country, and they have 4 times as many sheep as the United States. Canada doesn't even have 1 million sheep, according to my very quick, cursory research. But Turkey, yeah, Turkey has a lot of sheep. And because I see so much Turkish yarn, especially in your sort of buyer-friendly, like your yarn that's accessibly priced, a lot of synthetic, but it's also wool, and I think some cotton too. I decided, well, it'd be interesting to know the history of that, like why. So obviously a lot of production has moved to Turkey in recent years. One of the things I want to do in my novel, and some of you already know this, is I want to have a character set up their own yarn mill in Montana. And I was asking a friend of mine who has her own industrial carding machine how likely that is, how that would be possible. And I got a really interesting answer, because she was quite skeptical about how realistic that would be. So I'm going to figure out a way. Because I think it'd be just a really cool thing to sort of fantasize about, having your own yarn production facility, kind of like Fleece and Harmony on Prince Edward Island. That is kind of like, or like the people from Spin Cycle. I've seen interviews with them and how they produce their yarn. I think that would be really cool. So anyway, going back to Turkey because I just thought, wow, they make so much yarn. I looked up a little information and I'm going to share a couple of links. I'll just try to just throw out some points here. So I found a link. This is from 2022 and it says top 10 yarn producers in Turkey. And the article goes into how Turkey is. It's an important producer, consumer, importer, and exporter of cotton yarn, as well as an investor in the nation's short staple machinery. There's a lot of cool, interesting information here. High quality raw materials, cost-effective labor, accessible labor. Another thing that I think I have gleaned from these articles is that the proximity to Europe means that Europe, if I'm not mistaken, is like the biggest consumer of Turkish yarns. So the article is claiming, I don't want to miscount here, that as of 2023, Turkey remains a global powerhouse in yarn production. And that's certainly been my observation. And that says particularly in synthetic and cotton yarns. And we'll get to the wool yarns in a second. So it has some statistics on like the amount of the exports, $53 million in December 2023. Germany is the leading export destination, which is interesting. So Germany gets more Turkish yarn than the US. That's how big of a consumer Germany is for yarn. And I would have to imagine that per capita, Germany is a bigger yarn consumer just for like what we do than the United States. Prices peaking at $8,266 per ton. There's a lot of stuff on here that I don't really understand. But there are 10 yarn producers that are featured here. And here's some interesting stuff. Turkish spinning mills places strong emphasis on excellent quality, flexibility, and sustainability. I like hearing that Turkey is interested in sustainability. That is cool to know. They're constantly searching for new technologies that will offer them an additional competitive advantage. So we have Kipaş, K-I-P-A-S with a Sadia on the bottom. It was founded in 1984, the largest integrated manufacturer of yarn and fabric in Turkey and throughout Europe. So they have fabrics, apparel, and all kinds of different yarns, including Aerojet yarn. I've never heard of Aerojet yarn. That sounds kind of exciting. I don't really understand how synthetic yarn is produced. It's not something I've had a great interest in, but, you know, it's certainly out there, and I would be willing to learn more. 3 open-end yarn factories. That goes into a lot of statistics. 2,000 experienced workers. Let's see what they make. They export 50% of the yarn they produce. Then we have Gurtex, G-U-R-T-E-X. If you've heard of any of these and you know something, tell me. I think it'd just be really interesting to continue this discussion in the comment area. So the Gurtex makes acrylic, polypropylene, polyester, and wool acrylic yarns. And they're used to make fabric, carpet, and clothing, as well as home textiles. One of the top 10 producers of acrylic yarn in the world, this Gurtex place. They launched production facilities for carpet and home textiles in 2008, in addition to spinning yarn. Then we have Akarsoy. I'm just going to spell it, A-C-A-R-S-O-Y. And again, I'm going to link the article for you if you're interested. They were founded in the 80s. They produce and dye yarn of various materials, including viscose, cotton, polyester, modal, and tencel. Powerful team of 450 individuals. They meet the top 5% of global quality requirements. So I like seeing that Turkey has an emphasis on quality. Obviously, some of the, the yarn that I've seen, like at Hobby Lobby and stuff, it's, inexpensive. And I think that's the point, right? In fact, I was frankly intrigued to see that Walmart has also, in addition, quite a number of yarns from India now. That to me was kind of new. I didn't expect that. So I'm going to keep investigating this whole area. It's fascinating. This particular company, so I'm going to spell that again, A-C-A-R-S-O-Y, Akarsoy, continuously seeks to lower its carbon footprint with some special energy management system. Has a GES system in its roofs, and it'll use solar energy. Interesting. The Kaynak Group, so Kaynak, founded in the 80s. Again, a lot of these were founded in the 80s, so that intrigues me. There must have been something, maybe it had to do with the U.S. maybe exporting some of its yarn production. I don't know. But a lot of these places were founded in the 80s. Kaynak Group produces, let's see, yarn, fabric, towels, bathrobes, garments, also marble and metal. It's a top yarn producer in Turkey. Founded in 87. Let's see what else. Hosiery yarns. There's a lot of praise for these firms, which is great. Why not? Sanko. Sanko. That sounds like a coffee, like Sanka, but with an O. Sanko, one of the most powerful enterprises in Turkey. Since 1904, it's been a global leader in the production of environmentally friendly yarn and fabric. They spin, they have circular knitting, dyeing, and printing. Always investing in new spinning technology. See, that's, to me, that's key, right? I mean, who in the United States is now investing in technology for this kind of thing, right? I mean, we kind of gave it up. In fact, I heard somewhere else that really the forte of the United States is in the financial sector. That's really what we're about. We're not about manufacturing, So sure, we have small scale manufacturers, people who just want to do it on a small scale because they love it. But it's like not where the U.S. is at as an economy. We're in the financial sector. That's like where we have the most sway. So Turkey, they're making all kinds of investments. It takes infrastructure to do manufacturing, and especially now to compete at a level with like cutting edge quality and this kind of thing. I remember talking to a bike manufacturer with my son one time about what happened to all the Gary Fishers that were made in the United States. And they said, well, we just don't have the factories anymore. They take very special requirements with, sterility, cleanliness, robots, etc. And they do all that in Taiwan. Now they've moved it to Cambodia. It's almost impossible to just like drag all that stuff back. So without a plan to actually make that happen, is it really going to happen? I don't know. Let's look at the next one. MEM Textiles, MEM, one of the biggest integrated manufacturers in the Turkish textile sector. Initially focused on spinning ring yarn. I don't even know what a ring yarn is. If you know what a ring yarn is, lay it on me because I'm curious. They now provide knitted fabric, dyeing, and printing options as well as ring, open end, and vortex yarns. I assume these are synthetic yarns, and it has to do with the way that the material is like funneled and spun from the petroleum or whatever. With the aid of advancing technological infrastructure and R&D studies, right? R&D, right? You can't advance manufacturing and infrastructure without R&D studies. Therefore, you have to have universities. Therefore, you have to invest in the universities. Guess what? They produce high-quality products and according with demands, expectations, etc., etc. Yeah. Then we have Cortex, Kortekes. Cortex started in 89. And see if there's anything worth mentioning here. I'm always interested in what they make. It says, thanks to one of its members, Cortex, the Zorlu Group is also Europe's and the Middle East's largest integrated polyester yarn manufacturer. So this would be more for clothes directly, I think. I haven't seen polyester yarn per se that I would like knit a hat with, right? You tend to see more acrylic or maybe something mixed with nylon. They also do polymerization technologies, yarn texturizing, spinning, and master batch manufacturing. Then we have Beytex, Beytekes, started producing yarn in 93. One of the most well-known yarn manufacturers with open-end and ring yarns at low prices and, it claims, respecting environmental and human rights. So it's not, again, I'm just happy to see that Turkey is interested in sustainability and human rights. Can I verify this information? I would have to, work hard. If you know something I don't, please share it with me. But I think protecting human rights and observing the exigencies of climate change is crucial. Glad to see that they're doing that. Kara is another one. Maybe it's Kara, K-A-R-A. Exports products to 31 nations across 5 continents. has a vast variety of products, cutting-edge technology, investment in environmentally friendly and sustainable processes. Anadolu yarn is in Turkey, one of the major players in the domestic and international textile market, dates back to the 40s. Interested in sustainability again. So, and then there's a list here, and you can look at the article about pros and cons. We see if there's anything worth mentioning. Their yarn exports reached $3.2 billion in 2023. They are focused on high quality as well as variety, cotton, wool, and synthetic. Large production capacity. Obviously, that's key. 1.2 million spindles are in operation across Turkey. And the availability of skilled labor, obviously, that's key, right? You have to have not just labor, but skilled labor. And it mentions hubs. I'm not going to try to pronounce these cities, but, you know, again, you have to have an educational investment in order to make this happen. Technological advancements. Turkey's investments in modern spinning technologies, including automation and energy-efficient machinery, give manufacturers a competitive edge. So some drawbacks: political and economic instability, changes in government policies, economic sanctions. Political instability can disrupt the yarn production sector. Fluctuations in raw material costs. I saw one of the things I didn't notice in Walmart, but I saw this on several yarns at Hobby Lobby. It said produced of fiber from the USA in Turkey. So that was interesting. So raw material cost, environmental concerns. Textile manufacturing in Turkey faces pressure to reduce its environmental impact, including water usage, yes, and carbon emissions. Water usage is a huge problem worldwide. Some of the aquifers are just frankly going away. And part of that, frankly, is Nestle's fault. But that's another story. Dependence on imports. They rely on importing raw cotton. I wonder if a lot of the yarns I was seeing had cotton from the United States. Could be. And cotton is another, it's a whole area of environmental issues, right? High energy costs. Energy-intensive textile production has led to high operating costs. So then, let's just take a quick look at wool. I found a website called, my site isn't the greatest, International Wool Textile Organization. And I don't know anything about this organization, but it does seem to be pretty sanguine in the way that it portrays the wool production in Turkey. Apparently, there's a long history. When you think about the carpets, for example, Oriental carpets and the Ottoman Empire, it makes sense, right, that they would have had a lot of wool going back centuries to make a lot of these carpets that they're so famous for. A country steeped in history and culture, a significant player in the global wool industry. I think it's maybe, well, it's in the top 10. I'm pretty sure it's in the top 10. Again, 44 million sheep, nothing to sneeze at, right? They've been producing high quality wool for centuries. There's a whole report about it that you can download. I'll link this site as well. Now, this website, actually, I'm correcting myself. In 2023, Turkey ranked 4th globally in wool production with 43,000 tons. This impressive feat is attributed to the country's vast sheep population, estimated at 43.4 million. They have diverse wool varieties. They have merino and some local breeds, which I'll try to pronounce them. If you're Turkish and I'm saying it badly, forgive me. Kivirtik, Karyaka, Akaraman. So they have their own breeds of sheep. I think it'd be fun to look these up. Maybe try to get a hold of some fiber from these specific sheep. Just learn more about it. History of Turkish carpets and rugs. Artistic masterpieces, deeply rooted in the tradition, carpet weaving. And I'm reading this for the first time. The Angora goat is indigenous to Turkey. I did not know that. So, I'm learning something. It's always good to learn something. Angora goats produce mohair. I know that South Africa is famous for their mohair, but apparently they're indigenous in Turkey too. They also make wool clothing, luxury textiles, and specialized applications, firefighting gear. Insulation, I think there's more and more suggestion that to save sheep, to put the wool to use, because a lot of sheep that are eaten, the wool just goes to waste. Why not use it for insulation? So apparently in Turkey, that's a thing. They import some raw wool to supplement their production. They primarily focus on value-added textile production. Okay. Major player in wool yarn with significant production hubs in Bursa, Gaziantep, and Uşak. Again, my pronunciation is what it is. And some advantages. One advantage is supply chain traceability. I'm not an expert in that, but based on what little I know, this notion of transparency in the supply chain is important as far as ethical production and sustainability. So that's good to know. Shorter delivery times, especially for Europe. High sustainability criteria, strict chemical regulation. So apparently there's some regulation. I'm reading an acronym here called REACH, R-E-A-C-H, imposes rigorous standards on both producers and importers of substances and goods, guaranteeing high quality high quality and safe products. So there's a reason, there are many reasons why Turkey is in the position that it is with regard to yarn production and why it's so important. I've learned things just by preparing this report and reading off of these websites. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are on this topic. Have you, for example, knit with Turkish yarn? I mean, it seems like it's kind of everywhere. Again, when I buy yarn, I privilege either United States, Canada, maybe South America, European manufacturer. I don't know, I just feel more comfortable with it. But I've learned something about the Turkish yarn industry that is interesting, that makes me want to know more, especially about the wool, because that's what I knit with the most. So in any case, I'd love to know your thoughts, your comments on the topic of Turkey's yarn industry. Feel free to chime in with any details that you have based on your knowledge or experience of traveling in Turkey. And I'll plan to continue looking into some of these global sources of the yarn that we hold in our hands and knit with. So with that, y'all take care. We'll talk soon. Bye.